Okay, so it's Parshas Bamidbar, as you all know. It's the fourth book of the five books of Moses, the five books of the Torah. And there's something quite strange how the Torah introduces the book of Bamidbar. Obviously, it follows on, excuse me, after Yetziat Mitzrayim, after the Exodus from Egypt, after the miracles, after the splitting of the sea, after the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. And Vayikra speaks about the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And then it's as though the Torah slows down and begins speaking about, of all things, counting. And in this week's parasha, we have names, we have tribes, of course, the numbers, census lists. We have how the camps formed when they were stationary, when they traveled. We have the flags of the various tribes. And at first glance, it all looks very administrative. It looks very technical. And one could say that even it appears dry. Yet, our rabbis of blessed memory understood that this parsha contains some of the deepest foundations of Jewish identity. Because the opening words of Bamidbar, of this parsha, and indeed of the book, is not merely about statistics, they're actually about significance. And when the Torah introduces the concept, the mitzvah of the census, it says, Su'ur, the command to Moshe, Su'ur et Rosh Koladat Bnei Israel. Literally, it means lift the heads of the entire congregation of Israel. Now, of course, the Torah could simply have said, Hashem could have just given the instruction, count the Jewish people, right? That after all is what it's about. That is the census. Why the expression lift their heads? And Rashi famously explains that Hashem counts the Jewish people repeatedly. Of course, this isn't the only time a census is taken in the Torah, but Rashi says Hashem counts the people repeatedly because of his love for them, the chibah, the affection he has for them. But perhaps there's something even deeper. When governments conduct a census, people become numbers. In Judaism, when Hashem counts Jews, people become elevated. That's the concept, lift their heads. The counting itself becomes an act of dignity, it's an act of love. It's recognizing the people. If we think about the world today, maybe it was like that before, but certainly in today's time, maybe the greatest human fear isn't failure, but it's being invisible, right? People can maybe survive hardship, people can survive struggles, but people find it very difficult when they feel unnoticed, when they're unneeded, when they're unimportant. And perhaps this is the reason why the Torah begins the book of Bamidbar this way. Book 4 speaking about the journeys and the challenges and the rebellions, and there are going to be many dissatisfactions from the people in this book. Before we start reading about wars, as well, Hashem establishes one foundational truth, and that is that every Jew counts. And that doesn't mean just as a collective, but individually, personally, uniquely. And that message becomes even more powerful when we consider where, in fact, this counting takes place. Where does this take place? And it's told to us by the name of the Parsha and the name of the book, Bamidbar, in the desert. Now, why was the Torah given in a desert? The Torah emphasizes that all of this, all that we're going to read in Bamidbar, and of course what came before at Mount Sinai, which is in the desert, takes place Bamidbar in the wilderness. It's not by chance, it's not incidental, but it's actually essential. And the question is why, right? If you think of a desert, it really is a strange place to build a nation, and that's what is taking place here. If you wanted to establish a society, a people, a civilization, you would choose fertile land. You would choose a place where there's water, where there's infrastructure, maybe cities. What does Hashem choose instead? Hashem chooses the wilderness. He chooses emptiness, silence, dust. And again, why? Why is that? And again, our rabbis of blessed memory teach us that the Torah was given precisely in a desert because a person has to make himself or herself like a desert in order to acquire the Torah. Okay, that's the answer, but it sounds like we need to dissect it a bit more. And of course, I'm going to. What does it actually mean, right? You have to make yourself like a desert. So again, the rabbis explain that a desert possesses nothing, right? It makes no claims. It has no claims on anything. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't shout out for attention. All it does is it creates space. And perhaps what the Torah is telling us is that's the first condition for genuine spiritual growth. We need space. If you really think about it, most people are not distant from Torah. They're not distant from Hashem because they're evil. Of course not. Why are they distant? Is because they're overburdened, they're overcrowded internally. And again, it speaks to our times as well. People are too distracted, there's too much noise around, they're too consumed, they're literally too full of everything. And modern life doesn't give sufficient room for reflection, for pause, for introspection. Again, think of all of us, myself included. The minute you wake up, we're immediately reaching for our phone, checking messages, checking news. What notifications, what WhatsApp messages have I got? Social media. We live surrounded by constant stimuli, endless noise. And when there's finally a quiet moment, it can be when you're going in a lift, it can be in a queue, sitting alone for 2 minutes. Even then, we look to fill those few moments. Again, there's only 2 or 3 minutes, but we feel terribly uncomfortable. We're terrified by the silence. But Judaism teaches us that some of the deepest encounters with Hashem, and probably I'd say with ourselves as well, happen specifically in the silence, right? Not in the noise, not in performance, but in that solitude, in that stillness. You've got no distraction. You've taken away all the externalities. It's just you and yourself. It's just you and Hashem. And that's possibly why the Torah is given in a desert. Torah can't enter a person when that person is spiritually overcrowded, or just overcrowded in general. If you think of a cup or any container that's full, it obviously can't receive anything more. It's full, it's capacity. So only emptiness really creates a space for something greater. But Bamidbar and the desert also represents something else, and that is vulnerability. So in the desert, in Bnei Israel, our forefathers, they had nowhere to hide, right? There was no natural food supply. There was no natural water system. There was no economy. They didn't have the CSO. They didn't have military security at the time. Everything depended on Hashem, right? They depend, I'm trying to find the words. They depended on Hashem for everything. The man that came from heaven, the well of Miriam, the clouds of glory. So every single day forced them to confront the truth that modern people often try to avoid, right? We're not as independent as we imagine. And one of the great illusions of success is the illusions of control, right? We begin believing. And again, this is some of the warnings that Torah elsewhere tells us about, that a person would say, Kochi v'otzem yodi, it was my strength that built this, my intelligence, my great planning. And then life reminds us how fragile everything really is. Chas v'sholom, God forbid there's a health scare, or there's a financial crisis, or unexpected loss. And suddenly that whole facade, that whole illusion collapses. The desert stripped away that illusion from the Jewish people in the first place. There was never an illusion. And paradoxically, that vulnerability became the foundation of their greatness. Because it's only when a person stops worshipping or believing in his own strength can he really make space for Hashem. You have to be humble. You have to be able to take away the ego. If you think about life, right, none of us would want to choose a desert. What I mean by that, life throws you moments of desert, and certainly not moments of desert, but moments of desert when you feel uncertain, when things around you fall away, things that were familiar are no longer there. Moments where you feel absolutely vulnerable and exposed, lonely, unsure. Nobody chooses that. But as we know through our own experiences, that some of the deepest growth lies precisely there in those moments of desert, because that makes us face honesty, that makes us face a vulnerability, that makes us ask the questions that we need to be we need to be asking. Um, when we come to the issue of unity I spoke about, that the idea of the census, that we're all counted, yet it showed the individuality. Um, Torah amazingly is able to find the balance. So on the one hand, the Jewish people are one nation. We're part of the collective, right? We're part of Am Yisrael. But at the same time, and so importantly, is that the individual is never lost within that collective. The uniqueness of that one individual isn't consumed, isn't lost in the great experience of being in a community or part of part of a nation. And we actually see that as well in this week's Parsha, that every tribe had its own identity. Every tribe has its own flag, or a few of the tribes came together under a certain flag. It's had its own place where it encamped around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle, how it traveled. Each one had its own mission. Like again, Hashem doesn't expect the tribe of Yisachar, who were involved in Torah learning, to be like the tribe of Zevulun, who were the merchants, or the tribe of Yehuda, who were meant to be the leaders of Am Yisrael. And that is Judaism's greatest ideas, that unity doesn't mean the same. Unity doesn't mean sameness. If you think of just a practical example, why an orchestra works so well is because not everyone's playing the same instrument. If everyone played violin, you would have no diversity, you would have no harmony. It would just be this loud noise. Real harmony only emerges from the differences organized around a shared center. In other words, there's a score, there's a piece of music. And yes, it may look that one instrument's doing that and another's doing that, and there's a rest for one and while the other's playing, but it's all coming together as part of that one piece of music. And that's how it was with the Jewish people as well. Is that yes, they may have encamped differently, yes, they may have traveled differently, but what was keeping them all together was that center where the Mishkan was, where the tabernacle was. So yes, you've got different tribes, you've got different strength, you've got different personalities, but one Mishkan, one purpose in the center. Um, and again, if we think about um, our society today, again, modern times, we seem to be vacillating, going from one extreme to the other. Either we've got a situation of radical individualism where only I matter, it's my truth, it's my identity, or we've got the concept of conflict, conforming, of conformity, and the pressure to think alike, to speak alike, to what we call also herd mentality. Um, but Judaism rejects both. And it tells us, and we see that in the Parsha of Bamidbar, where it speaks about the count, that each of us matters uniquely, each of us is special to Hashem. But you also got to realize that you're not the center of the universe. Put your ego aside. Hashem is. Hashem is the center, represented by the Mishkan. The Mishkan was precisely in the center of the camp to remind the tribes, each tribe, that no matter how distinct they were, everything revolved around something higher and more important than themselves. Um, and we all need this center. We all need this purpose. That's what Torah gives us, because without that, then the ego is just left to do what it wants to do. I just want to move on. To something else, just while time is moving. I'm just looking at some of the points that I've put down over here that I don't skip. I did mention already that each tribe has its particular mission, has its particular purpose, right? And that's important to realize the uniqueness and the difference that each of us makes in our lives, and we should never compare ourselves to someone else. Like again, Yehuda, for whatever reason, was given the mission of leadership. So we shouldn't compare ourselves to Yehuda and say, I also want to be a leader, I could have been a better leader. Why is everyone, this person seems to be succeeding, this person seems to be happier? But again, Torah tells us that just like each tribe's journey was different and each tribe's encampment was different, so too it is with our lives as well. And we should be content. And again, if we have the Mishkan in the center, if we have God in the center, and we focus on what we need to do, then we shouldn't be worrying about what's happening in someone else's life. I've often told the story. I'll tell it again. My brother who's online um, knows it as well because he probably heard it from the same teacher, and that goes like this. I might have heard it from a few teachers, in fact, that Reb Zusha once told his students. I think the story is also told in the name of the Kotzker Rebbe, but I think it took place in the name of Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha told his students that one day when my time comes and I have to give an account to God, I'm not scared that God is going to turn around to me and say, Zusha, why weren't you like Moshe Rabbeinu? Why weren't you like David HaMelech? I'm not scared. I'm not scared that he's going to ask that question. I'm not a David HaMelech. I'm not Moshe Rabbeinu. But what keeps me up at night, what I tremble about, is that when I come before God, God is going to ask me, Zusha, why weren't you like Zusha? In other words, Zusha had his own mission in life. His mission wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu's mission. My mission isn't the mission of someone else. I shouldn't be comparing myself to someone else, another tribe, whatever the case may be. I've got to make sure that I'm sticking in my lane, realizing this is my journey. As long as in the center of that journey, you're coming along the journey with me. At the center of all of that is always the Mishkan, is always the Torah and what Torah expects of us. Um, just give me a moment. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention is that very, very important is we find that all the tribes are counted, right? Right at the beginning of the Parsha of Bamidbar, when the census is taken, we have the instruction given to Moshe Bar Shem to count all the tribes. Yet we find that one tribe is excluded, and they have actually a separate census done, and that's the tribe of Levi. So we need to understand why weren't they counted? We also know that they never received land like all the other tribes, and they obviously occupy a different role or have a different role within the nation. And why? So why is that? So again, Levi represents a very important truth. That truth is that society can't survive if nobody looks after, if nobody guards and protects spirituality. So every civilization naturally comes consumed with material issues, right? And they should be concerned, obviously, about economics, about infrastructure, about security, about politics. Obviously, all of those are important. But if nobody is going to be protecting the spiritual core, right, what I spoke about, that Mishkan, that central element, then eventually the entire structure is going to erode, is going to weaken from within. And the task of Levi was to remind, the tribe of Levi was to remind the Jewish people that human beings are not merely economic creatures. And in fact, we're not just creatures per se, we're not like animals, but we're spiritual beings. And again, that probably remains the greatest struggle of modern culture. Again, bringing it home, bringing it to our everyday now. That society constantly asks, the questions, what do you own? What do you earn? What have you achieved? Right? These are questions one experiences and one's asked. Yiddishkeit, Judaism, on the other hand, asks different questions. Now, what kind of person are you becoming? How do you treat other people? Do people feel uplifted around you? probably the most important one is, do you create holiness? Are you a holy person? Are you bringing holiness wherever you are? Because as we know, ultimately the most important things in life can't be measured financially. If you go, Rahman al God forbid, to a funeral, nobody is going to be speaking about how that person upgraded their kitchen or never upgraded their kitchen. Nobody's going to be praising the luxury car that the person drove or never drove. Um, so again, it's realizing, it's focusing on that which is important, that which is a spiritual, and that was the role of the tribe of Levi. I want to end off with this point over here that I mentioned before, that but it seems out of place that Bamidbar opens up. It's the fourth book of the Torah, and it speaks about, as I said, accounting, right? A census that Hashem takes. For those that maybe joined late, Rashi says the very act of a census is showing Hashem's love for the Jewish people. In fact, an example given is that like a jeweler who has many jewels, he may very well know how many pearls or sapphire he has, but he takes them out and he counts them because he treasures them, literally treasures them. And that's how it is with Hashem and the Jewish people away as well. So we know that Bamidbar has the problems, has Korach rebellion, has the spies, Moshe hitting the rock. It's actually quite messy, right? All that's to come later. And why is it? So again, in the same book that speaks about Bamidbar, each of us counting, that speaks about, as I said earlier, that spiritual growth really takes place in the Bamidbar moments, when we have that solitude, when we have that quiet, when we turn off all the other distractions. I spoke about moments of desert, which none of us ask for, but they come. Moments that make us feel alone, make us feel vulnerable. Again, we don't ask for them, but that's where the most growth often takes place from those moments. Well, okay, then why is it that what we find afterwards is all this mess, the Korach, the spies, Moshe hitting the rock? And the answer, I think, and it's what Torah tells us as well, is that we should never think that transformation is easy. It can be messy. Just because you've taken the decision that you want to grow spiritually, and of course that's an amazing decision to come to in the first place, doesn't mean it's going to be smooth from the beginning or even thereafter, right? Real growth can be uncomfortable. The desert wasn't the holiday, right? It was only through the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, that protected them from the heat, from the scorpions and the snakes. But the process was about becoming. We know that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they still had Egypt that needed to be taken away from them. They still had to grow spiritually and emotionally. And that's the concept. And that's what the book of Bamidbar is telling us. That don't be scared of the mess. Don't be scared if things don't always go to plan. Moshe would have hoped that he had a people, and this is a people that experienced all these miracles, right? They'd seen that experienced Hashem literally firsthand. Things are going to go so easy. This is going to be an obedient nation that's going to follow me. But it's not. It wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. And the lessons that they went through were lessons that they had to go through, were lessons that Moshe had to go through. And by us studying them each and every year, right, when we come back to the Parashiyot, it's again trying to understand. It's the Maseh Avot, Siman Labanim, the stories of our forefathers are signs, are guides for future generations, and that's what it is. Just to end off, I just want to bring it back to Shavuot. For those of you who maybe don't know, Shavuot is really soon. It's in fact tomorrow night a week. Crazy. And we always read Bamidbar before Shavuot. And again, I think the message is quite clear, and it's what I've spoken about tonight. And maybe we can say them in 3 points. One is that every Jew counts, right? Every Jew counts. Two, no Jew stands alone. And three, Torah requires humility. And the desert, in fact, represents all three as well. A nation traveling together, a nation dependent on Hashem, but a nation open enough to receive. Um, and that's what we have to be able to do. We have to be able to when it comes around to Shavuot, and again, I always speak about this concept because I believe it's a beautiful concept that when we commemorate the Chag, when we commemorate the Yom Tov, it's not just that we have matzah again for the Pesach and Shavuot, we stay up the whole night. We have cheesecake, whichever you prefer, or both. It's not just about that. It's about every year when that comes around again, the same spiritual energy that was originally there becomes available to us to tap into again. Pesach, freedom. Sukkot, trust in Hashem. Shavuot is again reconnecting to Hashem. It was the wedding of Hashem and Am Yisrael at Har Sinai. We have to be able to connect. How are we going to connect to Hashem? This is what we have to try in the week that's leading up to Shavuot now, to try to say, what can I turn off? What distractions in my life can I turn off, that I have the moments of solitude, I have the moments of quiet, I have the moments that I can connect, first of all, to myself, because I think it's probably first and most important, and then be able to connect to Hashem. What does it mean to connect to Hashem? It means to connect to His will, to the divine will, the Ratzon of Hashem, which is His Torah and His mitzvot. What can I take on? What commitment can I take on to study a bit more? Torah is so freely available today in any format, electronic, audio. It's so easy to listen to a shiur. But if we're listening to other podcasts, or if we're so distracted by other social media that we're involved in, we're going to miss out on the opportunity. If the glass is full, there's no place to put something else in. So as we approach Shavuot, let's make sure we empty the cup and leave space for what really is important, to be able to fill the cups with truly things that are eternal and not things that are just arbitrary and of this world. Wish everyone a good night. Thanks for joining. Obviously, as always, wish everyone a good Shabbos. I think we still will have a shiur next week. Unless things change, please take it that we will, please God, have a shiur next Wednesday night as well. Have a good night, everyone. Stay warm.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.